All right, everybody, thank you for coming to the regular meeting of the Reno City Planning Commission. Today's date is Wednesday, March 20th, just a little bit after 6. We will open it up with the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Rohrmeyer, please lead the way. Allegiance to the flag. All right, moving on to item number 2, roll call. Heather, if you may, please.
Harris Armstrong,
Here.
Manny Becerra,
Here.
Arthur Munoz, Carrie Rohrmeyer. Here. Alex Velto is absent at this time, and Sylvia Villanueva is also absent. So we do have a quorum.
And I'm here. You may have missed me.
J.D. Draculich.
Yeah, I'm here. All right, perfect. We'll move to item number 3, public comment. This item is for either public comment on any action item or for any general public comment.
Members of the public may call into the meeting to provide public comment by using the Zoom link provided on the agenda, specifically https://links.reno.gov/3SOT4Q3. It should be noted for those in the audience that comments are to be addressed to the Planning Commission as a whole. Comments heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Planning Commission agenda. Please note that the Planning Commission may not take action upon any matter not agendized for possible action on today's agenda. When you are called on for public comment, please state your name for the record and begin speaking. The timer will begin when you say your name, and you will be afforded 3 minutes. If you are an attendee in the Zoom meeting and would like to make public comment at this time, please raise your hand. Lastly, while in this room, please be respectful. Warnings will be issued by the presiding officer if there is disruptive behavior, and you will be asked to leave chambers if the behavior continues. With that, we did receive correspondence for general public comment that was forwarded to the Planning Commission and have been entered into the record. I do not have any requests to speak forms at this time.
All right, anybody on Zoom or voicemails? I think you said you forwarded them already, but.
No voicemails.
All right. Does anybody in the chambers wish to speak on general public comment? Oh, sir, would you like to speak in general or on a specific item? General. Okay, please. Do you have a request to speak for him there? Is that what that is?
You can fill it out after if you'd like.
Come on up. You'll have 3 minutes. Feel free to state your name when you start, and then give that piece of paperwork to Heather when you're done, please.
I've lived in Nevada, northern Nevada, most of my life. And I just want to comment on the North Valleys. I've gone back, ever since back to days of Cashel, I've gone to his office in the past about infrastructure, about 395. And I wish there was somehow that they could slow down building permits, building until infrastructure can catch up. I feel like there's a difference between southern Nevada and northern Nevada, and we're very behind as far as infrastructure. I feel like if we could have started like 395 10 years ago, we would have saved millions of dollars when I was pleading with Cashel in the past. And back then he was saying, oh, the federal government's going to take care of it. We won't have to worry about paying it, but it was still nothing really corresponded. Another thing is my wife's a nurse, mental health nurse, and it's really hard when there's a crisis, which is come Cold Springs to work at the VA. And I felt if they would have started the infrastructure 5 years ago, we wouldn't have this bottleneck. And another thing too, I'm a rideshare driver, and I've just seen it's just all over town. We're just so behind, and I really would wish you could take it into account to look at the big picture and say, hey, let's just slow down a little bit on some building until things can get caught up. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Yeah, feel free to give your form to Heather. Thank you again. Anybody else in the chambers wish to speak on general public comment? Seeing none, we will close public comment.
Hang on, Mr. Chair. We do have some folks in the Zoom
Oh, great.
that have their hands raised.
Please do.
Our first public commenter is Luis Sofron. Go ahead and unmute and state your name and state your comment.
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
Yes, my name is Louise Souffrant, and my question for the council is, are there any health issues for future residents living so close to the White Lake Playa for the Playa dust? Has and will there be any public health department evaluation done? This is regarding the White Lake development. Thank you.
All right, next up, we have Rebecca Flannery. Rebecca, you can go ahead and unmute. Rebecca, we will come back to you, but we're going to skip to the next public commenter, which is Aaron Fabry. Aaron, you're good to go. Please state your name and begin your comment.
Okay. You guys can hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Hey, nice to meet you all, and thanks for all the work that you do. I was born in Carson City, and I'm in the process of moving back. I bought some land, and I'm trying to build a house for my family, and I kind of ran into an intractable issue with the building permits process. There's a disagreement between the planning and engineering departments that has already cost us dearly, and I'm kind of at an impasse where I don't see any way to resolve it. Do you guys have any suggestions?
Sir, we're not answering any questions during public comment, but you continue to make statements, sure.
Oh, okay, just comments. Yeah, the sign-up form said questions and comments, I believe. Yeah, so I guess it would be nice to have a clear way to kind of deal with these sorts of issues. And I think there's clearly some sort of schism or disconnect between the planning and engineering departments. For example, just to give a little more detail and tell me when I'm out of time. The planning department had a determination on an easement that required us to merge two of our lots, which was very expensive. We lost a lot, and it was very disruptive. And so we get to the end of the process, and now the engineering department is saying that the easement does exist, or the opposite of what the planning department is saying, and saying that we can't proceed. And so the planning department led us down a road and forced us to do something that was very expensive and time consuming, and has now made our project unbuildable. So that's basically the situation, just so you guys have some awareness. And I would be happy to answer any of your questions offline. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Appreciate it.
All right, we're going to try Rebecca Flannery again.
Is it working this time?
State your name and you'll have 3 minutes.
Rebecca Flannery. And this is regarding the huge amount of growth that you are trying to do here in Cold Springs. I'm born and raised in Reno. The traffic now is just madness. It takes 45 minutes to an hour to get home from Moana. The morning is not any better. There's no back roads. We used to be able to back road. We can't do that anymore. There's just so much traffic. and there's so many people. So like the gentleman was saying earlier, is there any way we can just stop like the warehouses from coming out here till we can catch up? Because this is really having a detrimental effect to us out here. We moved out here to get away from the city and be in peace and not have traffic and crime. The crime in our town is skyrocketing. We don't have police. We don't have the proper infrastructure all around. You know, where are we getting police, doctors, teachers? We just keep bringing people here and then saying we have a lack of housing when you keep bringing people here and nobody can afford to live. So just, we need this growth to be a little more in line with our pay, our traffic. Just, we're frustrated, and most of our Renoites are really, really upset to see what our home is becoming. Growing up, we always were told to conserve our water because lack of water. And where's all this water now magically coming from? Sorry, I'm just speaking for a lot of us Renoites, and we're all overwhelmed and frustrated and stressed out, and our lack of our life that we used to be able to have is now being eroded for what I'm assuming is you guys being paid off by corporate America. Is there any relief coming our way, or is it just more grow, grow, grow? Thank you.
Thank you as well. Any more Zoom?
There are no more hands raised right now.
Okay, one more time. Anybody else in the chambers wish to speak on general public comment? Oh, we have another gentleman. Sir, come on over, state your name. You get 3 minutes, and when you're done, please go and fill out a request to speak form. Thank you very much.
My name is Richard Como. I'm a resident of Cold Springs. And I'm just going to, I guess I want to expand a little bit on what I've heard so far. Traffic's an issue. I've seen it grow in the 17 years that I've lived here. A lot of expansion in the North Valleys, but nothing's been done to improve the freeway. They're doing it now, but they're still doing it in a stretch that it really doesn't alleviate a lot of problems. That's number one, and I don't see that going away. On my way home from work, I see all these houses there to the right that have been built up. I've been coming up here for a little over 30 years for the air races, and I decided to become a resident up here. Unfortunately, that event left also, and I'm assuming it was because of the development that was done up there in the Red Rock, Office Stead. It's growing way too fast up there. I remember that used to be a rural area. You drive through there was nothing there. You could see people riding horses. I mean, it was really neat. Everybody knew each other. Now, good luck, with that. It's basically turned into the suburbs. And that's what's happened with this developing all of that up there. Now, I see it leaking or it's trying to leak over the valley, over into Cold Springs. I bought there it was further away from everything, and I'm talked with my neighbors. They like it there also because of the seclusion. We don't have the problems. I actually bought in the old part of Cold Springs where there are no lights. I'm an amateur astronomer, and we don't get any light, doesn't bleed out the sky. I noticed that I have a friend that used to live off of Red Rock, and at one time we used to just set up telescopes there, but even that's changed now with all the warehouses, and they have those, I don't know what they are, those lights that they use, but they just bleed out everything now. And so, that ended that. But we moved out there because of the beauty of the area, and now it seems like it's being encroached on. So our quality of life is changing because of this development. and everything. And I still see a lot of housing that's empty, so I don't know what the problem is there. And as far as affordability, I don't think we have any control over that. You folks might have a better way to do that, I don't know. My understanding with the water system, with the water that they're going to use for these developments, is they're going to bring it down from further down the valley. I guess they're going to pipe it up. At least that's what I'm hearing. I don't know. But my biggest thing is light pollution, the overdevelopment, traffic, and of course, housing. It's not affordable. I keep getting offers for my house, and I said, well, what am I supposed to do? Sell my house and then move under the 80 freeway somewhere? That's not going to work for me. So anyway, that's all I needed to say, I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Heather, any more Zooms come in? Okay.
Nope.
All right. Anybody in the chambers wish to speak on public comment? Seeing none, we will close item 3, public comment, move to item number 4, Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency Annual Report. So item 4.1, staff report.
All right, there we are. Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. For the record, Lauren Knox, Senior Planner. This agenda item addresses the 2023 Truckee Meadows Annual Report. So I'll give you a quick overview of what the annual report is. Per state law and per the regional plan, all local planning commissions and affected entities are required to submit a calendar year report based on actions taken throughout that year that furthers the policies and strategies within the regional plan. This helps Team RPA, the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency, not only track progress towards the implementation of the regional plan, but also helps gather information that we can use in our collective decision-making. So the report in front of you tonight is for calendar year 2023. I'll get into the specifics a bit more, but as an overall, there's a few highlights of the report on the slide overhead. This is items like the affordable housing and increasing housing diversity efforts, related development code amendments, the adoption of a new Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Master Plan, and overall involvement in the regional plan update, which is slated for adoption in October of this year. So generally, the report follows the policy sections of the regional plan, which may be familiar to those of you that are on the Regional Planning Commission. So I'll go ahead and touch on population growth first. So the regional plan requires that we all utilize what's called the consensus forecast. This is a population-based method for estimating kind of the future population in our area. So this information is used for planning-related analysis, which we do utilize, and that's a policy within our master plan. Housing is also viewed as a key part of planning for our population, and last year, carrying on to this year for this type of effort, staff has been undertaking housing initiatives, related work to address housing affordability, and this came before this body recently, you may remember, as a text amendment. Additionally, Council has acknowledged housing as a priority and has allocated funding, as described in the report, for these efforts, including things like waiving sewer connection fees and building permit fees, as well as allocating funding to support affordable housing development projects. So for regional form, the regional plan lays out a priority hierarchy for development, which generally discourages sprawl by prioritizing infill development in core areas and limiting development potential in these outer tier areas. The city's master plan framework and policies support and implement this policy concept. Additionally, through discretionary review, we have approved 1 annexation in the past year, as well as 4 master plan amendments, all of which are consistent with our master plan and thus the regional plan. So for public facilities and services, there's some crossover here with the regional forum in regards to prioritizing facilities and services and infrastructure in places that we want to see growth. So again, those infill core areas and generally areas that have already seen some level of development. This is the most fiscally efficient and responsible way to grow, which is why it's a key policy within the regional plan. The master plan utilizes what's called a concurrency management system to ensure new development provides adequate facilities and services to meet this policy within the regional plan. As part of the population forecasting work, TMRPA also develops spatial modeling that assists us with our long-term planning efforts, specifically for things like roads and sewer improvements, which we did utilize in 2023, their assistance for some of our work. They're also developing the public infrastructure plan, which we have been heavily involved with. The idea here is to get a high-level view of where infrastructure to serve development is and where capital improvements and infrastructure investments are being made. To support this effort, TMRPA also requires that we provide a list of capital improvements for the past calendar year, as well as our capital improvement plan. This is in each of the annual reports that come before you. This year, they're also looking for something called a list of assets to get a better understanding of where potential private investments in infrastructure to support growth are that then come to the city. This provides a little bit more wholesome view of kind of the infrastructure we have. For natural resources, generally, the regional plan aims to preserve natural features and mitigate impacts from development. The city's master plan contains many goals and policies that address the natural resources that are in the report. With regards to sustainability, in 2023, the city has streamlined the energy benchmarking program, retrofitted lighting in parks, completed a community solar project, and received a grant to plant trees, among many other things related to sustainability. Additionally, the city adopted the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Master Plan, which was really driven by priorities within the Reimagine Reno Master Plan. Team RPA has also been undertaking a natural resource plan effort, and staff's been very involved in that as well. For regional coordination, staff's been very involved in the Regional Plan Update Working Group, which meets regularly to help guide the Regional Plan Update process. Additionally, staff has been involved in the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan, the 2023 Nevada Legislative Session. Of particular note, Assembly Bill 213 has brought many of the local jurisdictions together for implementation of housing reporting, policies, and strategies as required by that bill. The Reno-Stead Corridor Joint Plan was officially sunsetted, which actually started as a regional plan change in 2019. So this required significant collaboration with the county and the community. And then additionally, the city is coordinating with the county on a cohesive Truckee River plan. So for 2024 efforts, the regional plan report process requires that we also talk about what might be kind of on the horizon for the next year with regards to implementing the regional plan. So there's a variety of items staff's working on or anticipating on working on in 2024 related to that implementation. So things like the code cleanup item, which you're going to hear about later this evening. A focus still on affordable housing and expanding housing choice and diversity, and further collaboration with all of the efforts that TMRPA is currently working on with regards to that regional plan update and their various specific efforts. So with that, there's a recommended motion on the screen overhead, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions, discussion? Oh, Commissioner Armstrong, please.
So one thing that you mentioned that I found interesting was it sounded like there was maybe a new focus on private infrastructure investment. Can you explain maybe what that would look like? What kind of infrastructure would a private entity invest in conjunction with the city, I'm assuming? And what kind of entities are those? Like what kind of private entities are you looking at?
So generally, the list of capital assets are things that are dedicated to the city potentially that might have a depreciating value. So these are items like if a development comes through, for example, and there's a roadway that's dedicated to the city, that might be something that becomes an asset list that then is tracked through regional planning so that they can get a better understanding of where that infrastructure investment is being made. So our CIP in our public infrastructure investments, that's already being captured very publicly, right? And this is just another layer of that piece that's being looked at to try and get that more wholesome view.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Munoz, I know you're virtual. Did you have any questions?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you are.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I don't have any questions, but I really appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
If no questions or discussion, we will need a motion for acceptance. Commissioner Becerra, please.
Yep, happy to make a motion. First off, great report. Thank you. Could I get the motion on the screen by chance? I move to accept the 2023 annual report and recommend that council accept the same report and forward to the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Commission and Regional Planning Governing Board.
All right, we have a motion.
Commissioner Armstrong, I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, we'll close item number 4, move to item number 5, public hearings. Any person who has chosen to provide his or her public comment when a public hearing is heard will need to so indicate on the request to speak form provided to the secretary. Alternatively, you may provide your comment when item 3, public comment, is heard at the beginning of this meeting. We'll now move to item number 5.1, which is case number LDC24-00035, North Virginia and Webb Industrial. Looks like we'll get a presentation from the applicant. Please come on up.
Good evening, Planning Commission. For the record, my name is Veronica Barton, and I'll be presenting a conditional use permit for North Virginia and Webb Industrial Project. So this property consists of 4 vacant parcels located on the east side of the North Virginia Street and Stead Boulevard intersection. The overall scope for the project is to construct 2 tilt-up warehouse flex shell buildings. There are 3 triggers for the conditional use permit. The first, we're requesting 24/7 operations on the MS zone parcels, which we will get into on the next slide, and also to allow grading resulting in fills over 10 feet on the northern side of the property, and the third, to allow the disturbance of a major drainage way that's going across the property as well. So the current zoning for the property is split between mixed-use suburban and IC industrial commercial. The 3 red hatched parcels are zoned mixed-use suburban on the left image, and the gray is industrial commercial. The master plan land use for all 4 of the parcels is industrial, and the total acreage for the property is around 9 acres. Here we have a landscape plan. I'll use this to go over the general findings for the subject property. Coming to the first CUP trigger, industrial zoning allows 24/7 usage by right. So we're requesting the same for the MS zone parcels of this property. The site has been designed to meet all City of Reno Municipal Code standards and requirements, as well as meet the master plan requirements for industrial zoning. The split zoning of the site triggers different landscaping requirements, and we have provided landscaping all throughout, and it's distributed with special emphasis on the major drainage way, and it exceeds the requirements. The nearest residentially zoned property for this site is almost 1,500 feet away, and there's a major freeway acting as a buffer. There are 2 mobile home parks within 500 feet of the property. There is also a significant buffer, and they're not adjacent to the property as well. All the neighboring properties have industrial zoning as well, with 24-hour operations for most of them. However, we are limiting truck movement between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. and requesting indoor operations for 24/7. Coming to the next trigger, which is the major drainage way disturbance, we're only proposing minor encroachment to the major drainage way by piping the minimum amount necessary to construct the proposed northeastern driveway and the right-of-way improvements. No other impact is proposed outside of this piping. The last trigger, which would be the fills over 10 feet, we're proposing that as it is necessary to provide for a functional site design and appropriate access to North Virginia Street. Despite the fills being over 10 feet, they're located and designed in a way to mitigate any potential environmental degradation, such as slope failure, stormwater runoff, etc. The location of the fills are also in compliance with the Reno Municipal Code, as well as the standards set forth in RMC 18.04.302. And that is the fill exhibit. Moving on to some of the other high-level design elements for this property, we are proposing 3 accesses. The eastern and the western axis will be a right-in, right-out only, and we're also providing pork chops that will restrict turn movements and enhance safety. We are proposing a full access for the center driveway, and we're also proposing 6-inch sidewalks all along the frontage to increase pedestrian access. These improvements are also being coordinated currently with RTC. We also submitted a traffic impact study and a noise study for this project, and it is with staff for their review. Per the trip generation letter that was prepared by the traffic engineer for this project, the anticipated daily AM peak hour and PM peak hour trips are well below the City of Reno requirements for an entry and access study. No road widening for left turn lanes are proposed with this development, as the upcoming RTC road widening project will be providing a center 2-way left turn lane. Lastly, the proposed design of the property includes truck docking bays that are facing one another, which will minimize truck noise generation towards the residences or any surrounding businesses. Given that this is an industrial and logistical warehouse-heavy area, the noise generated by the business activities of this property is not anticipated to increase the existing noise levels in a significant manner. I'll end my presentation with this. Here are some elevations for the project. The findings that we just talked about. And I also have here the civil engineering team for the project. Should you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Appreciate it. Looks like we'll get a presentation from the city. Hi, Carter.
Hello, Carter Williams, Assistant Planner for the record. Or sorry, Associate Planner for the record. So before you tonight is a conditional use permit for a industrial development located near the intersection of North Virginia Street and Webb Circle. The about 9-acre site is comprised of about 4 parcels. For area context, to the northeast is the Amazon local distribution facility, and then out of frame of this image to the northwest is Stead Boulevard. The specific request is for 24-hour operations, the disturbance of a major drainage way, and then grading that results in fills greater than 10 feet in height. The zones, this property has 2 zoning districts, industrial, commercial, and mixed-use suburban. For both zones, warehouse and distribution is allowed by right. So in the review of this case, the use itself isn't in question. It's specific to whether or not 24-hour operations is allowed or would be appropriate on the 3 mixed-use suburban parcels represented there. And I also want to point out the spotted nature of this area. Eventually, this whole area will transition into industrial pursuant to the master plan. Master plan policies that support this application are applications that support a modern industrial hub, as well as policies that protect and preserve hydrological resources, including major drainage ways. From a compatibility standpoint, this area is predominantly industrial and specifically warehouse and distribution and other storage uses. Again, we're not looking at the use, but all these are located within industrial zones which allow for 24-hour operations by right. So the 24-hour operation concept indoors would be consistent throughout the area. There are 2 mobile home parks within the vicinity of the project, and because of that and some non-conforming residential uses nearby, we've implemented a condition or are recommending a condition that exterior or outdoor truck operations be limited to between the hours of 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. Before we go into the drainage and grading conversation, just to introduce the site from staff's perspective at least. The truck dock orientation facing inward is a feature that supports the mitigation of noise and allows screening per requirements within the code. Landscaping is proposed throughout the site, but there is it's noted that it is centered or positioned more around the drainage way to integrate it better with the site. On the screen is the major drainage way. That is the existing course of the major drainage way represented in yellow. Generally, the majority of the drainway is going to retain its original course, and currently it actually is piped on both ends. So it's piped under North Virginia Street and continues northeast into the adjacent site through a pipe. So this is a limited area where it is exposed, but its code requires that it is generally retained as an open channel, and it's restored to a natural condition. On the screen is the exhibit showing the grading that exceeds 10 feet in height in red. Generally, these areas are limited in scope and size to only fill cavities and do not disturb any sort of significant hillside features. On the screen are the findings for a conditional use permit. Through staff's review and analysis, we were able to meet all the findings. In addition to this, for grading projects, there are findings specific to cuts and fills, and we were able to meet all those findings. Most of them are related to hillside development, which this wouldn't be generally applicable. And on the screen is the recommended motion. I'm available for any questions.
Thanks, Carter. Appreciate it. We'll go to the commissioners for disclosures. Commissioner Armstrong, please.
Commissioner Armstrong, no disclosures.
Commissioner Becerra, please.
Commissioner Becerra, no disclosures.
Commissioner Rohrmeyer, no disclosures.
Commissioner Velter, no disclosure.
Commissioner Munoz, please.
Commissioner Munoz, no disclosures.
Commissioner Draculich, no disclosures. All right, we will now open it up to public comment. I don't have any requests to speak for him, but Heather, anybody on Zoom?
It doesn't appear that anyone on Zoom has their hand raised. I don't have any requests to speak forms. We didn't receive any correspondence. Sorry, we did get someone on Zoom to raise their hand. No correspondence, no voicemails, and just this one person on Zoom.
Please, go ahead.
Rebecca, if you're ready, go ahead and start. You'll have 3 minutes.
Sorry, for some reason it's open on my phone and on this iPad. Sorry, it's throwing me off. So my question is there any intention of putting a light over there? Because we have a school bus yard and it's already hard as heck for them to get in and out of there with the lines of traffic that go down Virginia when 395 is atrocious. What about the school buses? You know, I mean, who decided that this should be all warehouses out here in the first place? This is not very accommodating. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Heather, anybody else on Zoom?
No, there is not.
Okay, anybody in the chambers wish to speak on this item? Yes, please. Separate from general public comment. Please state your name and you'll have 3 minutes.
Frank Schenk, I do go on that route on Old Virginia. And just want to comment, it would be good to have an extra lane on that road. It's a single lane most except near the Amazon. And all along that Old Virginia, there's wrecked cars, there's junk. I mean, I counted like 10 cars just on the side. So I wish, these people could have the responsibility and keep that street clean. But anyway, I just want to comment, and it'll also be good to have a bike path along that route. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you as well. Anybody else in chambers wish to speak on this item? Seeing none in the room, I'll double check with Heather on Zoom. Anything else?
No one has their hand raised.
Okay. All right. We will close public comment on this item and open it up to the commissioners for questions of staff or the applicant. Commissioner Munoz, I know you're virtual. If you want to jump in, I can't see your hand if you are.
Commissioner Munoz, no, I'm ready to go into comments if nobody else has anything.
Go into a discussion. Is that what you said? Sorry.
Excuse me, yeah, discussion.
Okay. Not seeing much activity in here. Commissioner Munoz, if you want to kick off discussion, we can.
Yeah, with the nature of North Virginia already, this actually fits right into what is going on up there. It's going to be lower impact. It is commercial, though, I'd love to have, like I said before, more restaurants, more shopping areas, more places for infrastructure type stuff. This is jobs, and having more jobs up here does help dampen the traffic going into town. So there's definitely the benefit to that. This fitting the area, along with those reasons, I don't see any reason not to approve this. I don't see anything wrong with it. It looks like a good project. Thank you.
Thank you as well. If there's no other discussion on the board here, you can feel free to make a motion.
In the case number of LDC 24-00035 North Virginia Web Industrial, based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I move to approve the conditional use permit subject conditions listed in the staff report, and I can make the findings.
All right, we have a motion.
Commissioner Armstrong, I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Good luck with your project. All right, we'll close item 5.2 and move on to, closing item 5.1, moving on to 5.2, staff report for possible action in regards to case number LDC 24-00041 9590 North Virginia Street zoning map amendment. Leah, we're getting a presentation from the applicant.
The applicant is virtual.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, Commissioners John Krompotic, can you hear me okay?
We're good to go, buddy.
Okay, I'm getting the Zoom message that says you cannot start screen share while the other participant is sharing. So whatever that means. There we go. I think it's coming in now, right?
Try to share again, John, if you don't mind.
I think we're there now. Can you see that?
We cannot see anything, no.
We'll try share again. I think you'll see it now, perhaps.
Okay, yep, there it is.
There it pops in. Okay, very good. There's a little bit of lag here. I think does that pull full screen now? Is that good?
Yeah, you look good, buddy.
Thank you. It's all good. Thank you. Do you need a disclosure on why I'm participating virtually, or are we good?
I'm good, but
You
no
don't care.
disclosure. You're okay.
Thank you very much. I'm usually in the chambers. John Krompotic, I'm representing the applicant, who is BJAC Corporation, for the zone change from MS to IC on the 2-acre site. I really have three things to share, and then I'll keep the rest. I got a lot of detail, of course, to be prepared in terms of findings, the intended use. But I think the three key points are, if you look at this map, it's entirely dominated by industrial and logistics types of uses, which are foremost allowed and fundamental to the proposed zone. And as staff pointed out, the MS zone specifically removes residential type uses, healthcare type uses, and education type uses in this sea of industrial. And again, we have them labeled in a fairly broad sense in every direction beyond the subject site. Warehouses, some outdoor storage, you can see the on-track warehouse, and then there's a couple of other mobile home parks that have been there for years. The other is, as staff also pointed out, the MS zone. So there's the existing master plan, there's the existing zoning and proposed zoning. I see that MS master plan, is probably every one of you commissioners know, is not compatible with the I master plan. So that is also fundamental to this request. So with that, I do have some zoning analysis about conforming districts about the industrial logistics area of which this is part of, and then these findings in my analysis as well. But with that, I think I'll turn it over to the commission and to staff for their presentation and save the rest for any questions you may have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. And we'll get a presentation from staff. Hi, Leah.
Picotti, Associate Planner with City of Reno Development Services, and I am just following up on Mr. Kropottek's presentation here with a brief presentation of my own. Basically, what we all need to understand here is that the current zoning is not in conformance with the master plan. This is the same area in North Virginia that we've seen repeatedly that have come in for these zoning map changes from MS to IC. So here you can see the site. This is just down the street from the one that Carter just presented. As you can see, it is surrounded by industrial type uses. There are no residential uses in close proximity to this particular site. The request is a zoning map amendment from mixed-use suburban to industrial commercial to bring it into conformance with the master plan. You guys have all seen this list before of the conforming base zoning districts for the industrial master plan land use designation. As you can see, MS is not on that list, but industrial commercial is. You've also seen this. This is that summary of uses that kind of explains that residential would be allowed in MS, but it would not be allowed in IC. And then some less intense industrial like indoor salvage or tow yard would be permitted in IC where it wouldn't be permitted in MS. The development standards are changing slightly. You can see that in front of you here, and it's included in your staff report as well. Here are the recommended zoning map amendment findings. Staff has reviewed these two findings and has found that it does conform with state law, and it definitely conforms with the master plan. That concludes my presentation. The recommended motion is on the board, and I am available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Appreciate it. We'll go to the commissioners for disclosures. Commissioner Velto, please.
Commissioner Velto, no disclosures.
Commissioner Rohrmeyer, no disclosures.
Commissioner Becerra, no disclosures.
Commissioner Armstrong, no disclosures.
Commissioner Munoz, no disclosures.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Draculich, no disclosures. We will now open it up for public comment. I don't have any requests to speak forms. Heather, do we have anybody on Zoom? Voicemails?
We did not receive any correspondence or voicemails for this item, no request to speak forms, and it does not look like anybody on Zoom has their hand raised.
All right. Anybody in the chambers wish to speak specifically on this item? Seeing no one, we will close public comment and move to the commissioners for questions of staff or the applicant. Commissioner Munoz, I'm got crickets down here.
Yeah, no, I have nothing. Nobody wants to do discussion. I'm ready to make a motion.
I'm seeing a head nod or two, so go for it.
Okay, the case number LDC 24-00041, 9590 North Virginia Street zoning map amendment based on compliance with the applicable findings. I move to recommend the city council approve the zoning map amendment by ordinance, and I can make the findings.
We have a motion.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Rohrmeyer. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Good luck to you, John.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. Nice to see you all.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
All right, closing item 5.2, moving to item 5.3, case number LDC 23-00020, White Lake Parkway Master Plan and Zoning Map Amendments. Oh, hi, Garrett. Sorry. Go for it, buddy. Looks like get a presentation from Garrett, the applicant.
I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. For the record, Garrett Gordon, tonight representing Lifestyle Homes. Behind me, it's nice to introduce, I have 3 generations of listeners. Bob Listener, Peter Listener, and Dustin Listener have been developing up in Cold Springs for almost 30 years now. So they know this area very well, and we are excited to present this project to you, which is a twofold request for a master plan and zoning map amendment. The area roughly is 218 acres, located on the east side of White Lake. Exit, you can access the property both off of Village Parkway on the north side of the lake, and then on White Lake Parkway on the south side of the lake. The first request is a master plan amendment. You can see on the left-hand side, it's really kind of a smorgasbord of different master plan categories. We have single family, we have suburban mixed use, and then you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, we have some open space. The request is to convert it to mixed employment, which is a more modern land use in the master plan, and will accommodate what we're proposing is a hybrid of neighborhood commercial and industrial type uses. The zoning map, you can see again on the left-hand side, neighborhood commercial, single family 3, and there's actually a little pocket of industrial down there at the bottom. So again, we're taking all those different zoning categories and creating one SPD specific plan for a handbook. We thought the best way to come before you tonight, kind of a unique location, it was best to work with staff. And for the record, I want to thank Grace for the last 18 months working with us on coming up with a handbook that really, I think, hits home the market and the need for some commercial and jobs in the North Valleys, as well as being certainly sensitive to the lake, the open space, and you'll see some pretty unique trail ideas to tie this all together. And I'd also note, currently under SF3, we could build about 400 homes there. So, and that would be by right. So again, we're taking the residential use out and moving forward with the handbook. So you'll see before you tonight in your packet, we have a master plan amendment change, we have the zone change, and then the zone change triggers the handbook. And our White Lake Commerce Center handbook really does 4 things. Provides a development schedule, provides a land use plan, provides development standards, as well as some site planning standards to give the developer and the community certainty of what would be developed there one day. So development schedule. Nowadays, when these specific plans come before all of you, eventually City Council, there's some time frames. Like the old PUD handbooks had to be built within 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. So we came up with staff and said, let's put a development schedule of 15 years. We think that's the appropriate time frame to build out 218 acres. If we don't hit that time frame, we'd have to come back before you and ask for an extension or modifications. And you can see here the rendering. We don't know exactly what will be built here, but what we do know is it'll be a combination of neighborhood commercial, some restaurants, some personal services. I'll hit more on top of that on that issue a couple slides down, but I think this is a great view of between the commercial on White Lake Parkway and the lake would be the warehousing, the industrial, other type job, economic development uses. But along that stretch of White Lake Parkway, really have a traditional kind of shopping area that's very needed in the North Valleys. So the land use plan, this is built into the handbook. It really breaks this up into 3 categories. One of the 218 acres, 184 would be that mixed employment. You can see there in purple, which would accommodate kind of the warehousing and the bigger box developments. 2, this was very important to staff, and this was very important to the feedback we received at the NAB meeting. This community wants commercial. They've been asking for it for a long time. They'd like restaurants, they'd like dry cleaners, they'd like coffee shops. Rather than commuting into town for those type of services, they want it in their backyard. There's a lot of rooftops in Cold Springs, and it was important to staff that we have a minimum. We can always go higher, but we have to have a minimum of about 11.5 acres of neighborhood commercial along White Lake Parkway to hopefully bring those services into this community that they've been asking for. And 3, this question came up, we are changing, you can see the zoning in the bottom left-hand corner of open space. That open space is being rezoned to a specific plan for the handbook, but you can see in the land use plan that stays. So the 25 acres of open space remains 25 acres of open space. We're not impacting that whatsoever. So the handbook, as far as the neighborhood commercial, you can see here some renderings. Again, we anticipate and hope for built out of almost 12 acres of neighborhood commercial along White Lake Parkway. In our land use table in the handbook, it includes retail, restaurants, personal services, childcare, community servicing office uses like medical offices. Again, I've been before this body a handful of times on North Valley's projects, and we've always heard commercial. Well, we've finally put that requirement into a handbook, and hopefully it gets built out. There was also a question of, well, what if a restaurant wants to come in or a bar that wants to operate 24 hours? It was important to staff to kind of have that check, that if there wasn't a use in the commercial strip that wanted to go 24 hours, we'd have to apply for a minor conditional use permit just to make sure it's in the right location and is sensitive to any surrounding residents or other businesses. And again, here's another rendering, commercial. We heard that. We think this is a great opportunity, some great views of the lake. You have a lot of rooftops across the street and then up Village Parkway in the Cold Springs. And we really hope this is that shopping neighborhood commercial center that's been desperately needed up in the North Valleys. Mixed employment. So I'm transitioning now from that neighborhood commercial orange color into that purple color of that mixed employment. Mixed employment category does allow 24 operations, but part of the timing that went into this handbook since we submitted and since I'm here before you tonight is really working on these conditions to make sure that we're very sensitive to the residents across the street on the other side of White Lake Parkway. So what's in the handbook? Number 1, employee parking has to be behind the 10-foot combination berm rock wall within 200 feet of residential. And you'll see a lot of those references to the distance between the residential use and the project to make sure we're minimizing impacts to the residential. 2, this has been pretty consistent in a lot of the handbooks you've approved for industrial. No loading docks within 300 feet of any residential use and oriented away from White Lake Parkway. So you can see the examples there on top. We had those drafted so you could see if an industrial warehouse project came forward, what it would look like as far as dock orientation. You can see no docks are facing White Lake Parkway. The docks are all internal to minimize that noise. And I should also note to my right, but to the north of where these buildings are located is currently Reno Truss, which is a heavy industrial operation as it is. Indoor manufacturing and also outdoor storage. So these projects would certainly be compatible with the Reno Truss project and operations that are happening just next door. 3, no docks facing White Lake Parkway within 500 feet of a residential use unless screened by another building. 4, all loading and unloading between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. have to be in an enclosed trailer. I know you've seen this condition before. If you're operating in the middle of the night, the trailer has to be backed up into a sealed dock door so there's no noise impacting the area. Also, no backup alarms, beepers between that period of time, and also no running refrigerator equipment between that period of time as well. So I think we hit all the concerns and all the potential noise impacts to the area and mitigating them with all these conditions. Finally, it was important to staff to kind of limit the size of these buildings, and so we are limited to 500,000 square feet for a single tenant building. If we did want to go larger, we'd have to come with a conditional use permit, which would come before this body, so you could evaluate those impacts of a larger building. Project entries, worked again with staff on making sure as well landscape, different types of trees, accent trees, and making sure that, you can see the rendering here, having a nice welcoming entry into the development. Sidewalks, of course, important. We're trying to get that connectivity from Village Parkway down White Lakes Parkway, so you can see the sidewalk standards, again, landscaping standards, buffering standards are all implemented, and there's a little rendering of what it could look like. Traffic analysis, we heard about this earlier from, I think, public comment. I'd note two things. One, we don't know what the project's going to be yet, right? We have a lot of uses in the land use table of what the project could be. So we built into the handbook some safeguards to make sure when the project came forward, no building permit would be issued until either a trip generation letter or a traffic impact analysis was in fact completed. And in that bottom paragraph, you can see it absolutely would be required by the developer to implement and construct any mitigation measures or improvements necessary to meet acceptable levels of service. White Lake Parkway currently meets the level of service. We cannot do anything as regards to a project with exceeding that level of with exceeding an acceptable level of service, and that there's any improvements that are needed, we'd have to build those out. Two, our traffic engineer also noted, and I believe Commissioner Munoz mentioned this early on the earlier item, jobs, right? We want to bring jobs into this area, the reverse commute, right? Rather than having all these rooftops, these folks commuting on 395 into the city, hopefully we're providing jobs for them in their backyard to stay in the area, as well as some neighborhood commercial uses. Rather than commuting on 395 to go shopping or go to a restaurant, we're keeping that in the area, again, reducing trips. So you'll see in the packet, certainly it's a fact that industrial uses are a lot better as far as peak hours on 395. Trails and open space. So we've agreed, and certainly staff is, I think one of the reasons why they're recommending approval is because we're agreeing to connect White Lake Parkway to Village Parkway with a trail system. We have to have a 10-foot wide green belt between the lake and our development, as well as a pedestrian path that connects those areas. There's a lot of cool stuff out there. There's a lot of wildlife out there. It's a really great lake. So we're going to add 2 interpretive signs, kind of discussing the area, the history of the area, the wildlife that's out there, so folks can meander or run or ride their bikes and kind of appreciate what's going on, including adding 3 benches. There's a little rendering of what the trail could look like. So you can see there's the lake, there's kind of that green belt or that open space, and then the trail system would run kind of along the border of the development. There's kind of another rendering. So you have this trail system connecting, really a long trail system connecting to 2 points of access, and the trail has to be built before we go vertical. So we can't get away with building anything vertical until that trail system goes in. And that was important to staff to make sure there was a trigger point of not pushing the trail to the end of the development, but making sure it's built at the beginning of the development. Fiscal impact analysis, always important. What's this going to do to the city's general fund, to the city's street fund? And as you know, for any master plan amendment nowadays, you have to submit a fiscal impact analysis, which did conclude that the revenue from this project would be an amount of approximately $210,000 to the city's general fund, but also over $1.8 million to the city's street fund. Conformance with master plan, certainly this is important. I just pulled this, I couldn't have said it better, right from the staff report. Community development, this is really pulling out some uses that probably are not that compatible with the area, putting a handbook on top and bringing in these neighborhood commercial uses that are desperately needed. This area is certainly identified as a modern industrial hub, and so we believe that the industrial portion of the project absolutely conforms with the master plan. We're providing neighborhood services, a neighborhood center, and then transitioning into the unincorporated county open space. The fact that we're going to have this great trail system that runs along an area with open space, connecting to 2 points of access on White Lake Parkway and on Village Parkway that again extends out into additional trail areas, we think is a win-win for the development and as well as the community. Important, I know, always to North Valley's is public engagement. And I can say on behalf of Lifestyle Homes, they always go above and beyond. I even told them, no, we should not put this on Nextdoor because you never know what you're going to hear. But they put it on Nextdoor, and to my surprise, it said, well, when's a bakery coming? When's a nursery coming? There was some excitement, actually, to bring some commercial and retail uses out to the area. So we had a neighborhood advisory board meeting, which was required, but as always, the listeners go above and beyond and held a neighborhood meeting. And what did we hear? Commercial, which we've added. There used to be a land use in the commercial zoning to do multifamily. The community said, no. You're promising us commercial, we don't want apartments to go up. So we removed that out. So you cannot build apartments in that neighborhood commercial anymore, which was a fair comment. Strict 24-hour use standards, which I went through, where the docks can be, where the screening should be, et cetera. And then finally, traffic impact safeguards, which we built in. You have to do and not only do a traffic letter or comprehensive study, but whatever those impacts and the conditions and the mitigations are required, you have to build those before the first building permit. So we think we hit that as well. So with that, I appreciate the time, Mr. Chairman. We're all here for questions, and we are in total agreement with all of staff's recommended conditions and the final conditions in the handbook. Thank you.
Thank you as well. We will get a presentation from staff. Hi, Grace.
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. Grace McAdin, Senior Management Analyst for the record. Here to discuss the White Lake Parkway SPD and Master Plan amendments. So Garrett did a great job of summarizing the project, and so I'll just kind of fill in some gaps as needed. The subject site is located in Ward 4 in Cold Springs, east of White Lake and generally west of White Lake Parkway, so right in between the Playa and that White Lake Parkway. So the applicant is requesting a master plan amendment from a number of uses: suburban mixed use, single family, parks, greenways, and open space, all to mixed employment, and then a zoning map amendment from neighborhood commercial, single family 3 units per acre, and parks, greenways, and open space to a specific plan district. And we'll discuss these details a little bit more throughout the presentation. Some key issues that staff looked at when analyzing this project were compatibility, available of services and infrastructure, and conformance with the master plan. Here is the proposed zoning map amendment that demonstrates the change. As you can see, there's a handful of different zoning districts that are currently assigned on the site. This is a carryover from county zoning when the site was annexed. And the proposed SPD zoning comes with the handbook with a specific development standards that we will discuss later. Although it's turning into that light pink color, there's a breakdown of kind of what's allowed in certain areas, kind of as Garrett discussed. Similarly, with the proposed master plan, we see a handful of different uses, a handful of different master plan designations replaced with mixed employment, which generally supports, we'll see kind of some light industrial employment and research type uses. Now we can discuss the SPD handbook and what type of development we can anticipate. The proposed handbook includes a minimum of 11.45 acres of that neighborhood commercial zoning, and that would have to be located generally between White Lake Parkway and the rest of the development. And so we kind of anticipate that this will serve as some sort of buffer to have those commercial uses pushed forward towards White Lake Parkway and the residents, and then those industrial uses, behind or somewhat buffered from where most of those residents are located. And then the rest of the area would be allocated to about 182 acres of mixed employment and then 25 acres of that open space. Additionally, in this handbook, we can account for mitigations for the industrial development near residential, including, like Garrett talked about, 24-hour use mitigation, loading dock restrictions, and additional screening requirements. Something I would like to point on is that 24-hour operation. Garrett did a pretty good job of summarizing this. I think something to specifically look at is that number 4 that prohibits backup equipment and alarms between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. These are generally kind of some of the bigger complaints we get, so we tried to address these and stay ahead of the curve on that part. So the development standards that are proposed are very similar to what we see in Title 18 for the respective zoning districts. Some differences that are actually more restrictive than code include lighting and front setbacks to ensure compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood. So in conclusion, we don't necessarily know what the final development will look like, but this provides us with some parameters that are actually above code to understand what can be constructed in the future on this site. Prior to submitting the staff report, I had received 11 public comments, 8 in support and 2 in opposition, with 1 neutral comment. And then after I submitted the staff report, I received about 20 comments, and I think those were hopefully all forwarded to the commission, who were all in support of the proposed project. Here are the findings for a zoning map amendment and the findings for a master plan amendment. And then finally, the findings for a specific plan district. So the recommended motion's on your screen, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Grace. We'll go to the commissioners for disclosures. Commissioner Munoz, please.
Commissioner Munoz, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
There you
Yes,
are.
we can.
Sorry. Yeah, no disclosures.
Commissioner Velto.
Commissioner Velto spoke with the applicant's representative, received and, I don't think I received any emails actually, just spoke with the applicant's representative.
Commissioner Rohrmeyer spoke with the applicant's representative and reviewed the many emails received to all of us.
Commissioner Becerra spoke with the applicant's representative, visited the site, reviewed public comment.
Commissioner Armstrong, I spoke with the applicant's representative, and I read and received emails.
Commissioner Draculich visited the site, met with the applicant and their representatives, and read and received emails. All right, now we will open it up to public comment. I do have one request to speak form. Notably, it says Frank does not wish to make a statement, but is in favor. Do you wish to make a statement? Come on up, Frank. Yeah, it's okay. Come on up.
Frank Shank, Cold Springs. I did serve on the Citizens Advisory Board for some years in Cold Springs. I'm not on it anymore. And I'm just going to kind of speak for myself, but I just have some concerns. One is 911 calls. I know this is city and we're county. How would that work? I would like to see perhaps a Reno PD substation there, Center City. The White Lake Parkway, I'm very concerned because it's just a single road. And I mean, I'm for the retail, it's great, but the warehouses, I'm a little nervous about because of traffic and semi-trucks. So I'd really like to see expanded lanes on all the way along White Lake Parkway to 395, going both through Bordertown and through the other route. Sorry, I'm not very clear. The other thing, I really like to see preserved as a bike path somehow because there's events that happen every year there where they do timing and stuff. I like to see that event continue. I'm kind of concerned about being close to the dry lake there, the warehouses. I know they had the nightmare with Swan Lake and the lawsuits and all that, and I hope that there's a study on flood plain, and especially if another development comes in similar to Stonegate, because I think that folded, but there's got to be some concerns on that lake. So I hope that there's a study on that. I guess that's about it, but I did have a good talk with Peter, and I'm kind of thrilled about the retail, but I'm a little hesitant about the warehouses and traffic. But anyway, I hope I consider about having a police substation because we could really use it. We get more and more crime, and I'm really concerned about flooding. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. Are there anybody on Zoom? Any voicemails?
It doesn't look like there's any hands raised, right? Oh, I'm sorry, there is a hand raised.
Okay. Go ahead.
Rebecca Flannery, you're up. You're still muted, so please unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
My apologies. So with this, I do not think that we need any warehouses. I think we have enough out here. Not everybody works at a warehouse. But for the other thing you were discussing, as far as, because I work in medical, and not a lot of medical facilities are out here. What are we offering for medical jobs? I know it's a thing that's needed out here very much, as well as restaurants. But I've also been told that a lot of restaurants don't want to come out here because we don't have the population. And then is there really going to be another 400 homes built on that lake? Like that lake increases and decreases in size all the time. What are we doing about flooding, like the last gentleman said? I guess that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Heather, anybody else on Zoom?
No one else has their hand raised.
Anybody in the chambers wish to speak on this item? Sir, do you want to speak again? Okay, come on up, but you will need to fill out another request to speak form. Thank you. Please state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Richard Como, resident of Cold Springs. The commute wasn't that bad until all the warehouses went up between Red Rock and Lemon Valley in that area. So it's gonna stay bad until something gets done about that. Also, I live in that one area. I wish I had that map up where all those houses are at right along there, and I can go in my backyard and I could actually look up and see the National Forest there. That's going to be gone once this is built. A lot of people that moved up there, because it is rural, that's all going to disappear. There's a lot of people on the north side of that area in the valley that own horses. Where are they really going to be able to ride them once all that? And then you have truck traffic going through there. Basically, you approve this. What you're doing is you're turning Cold Springs into Palmdale, Lancaster, California. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. If you can fill out a request to speak form, please. Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Anybody else in the chambers wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, we will close public comment and move it to the
Mr. Chair, I still have one more statement to say.
Oh, okay. Please do.
We did receive correspondence for this item that has been distributed to the Planning Commission and is part of the record. 26 in favor and 1 opposed. We have not received any voicemails for this project.
All right. Thank you very much. We will close public comment and move to the commissioners for questions of the applicant or staff. Commissioner Munoz is quiet down here if you want to jump in. Oh.
Yeah, Commissioner Munoz, I'll jump in real quick. First off, a project of this magnitude and changing that much area would make me more hesitant if it wasn't for what they were offering or what they're proposing. There is a large differentiation between each thing that they're proposing here, which is something that I believe the North Valley really needs. The commercial aspect of that, or community commercial, is huge. Stuff that people can use up their restaurants. It's what everybody's screaming about, and I think that's why we have in the last statement that the city made, so many people in favor of something like this. I would be a lot more hesitant if there wasn't a handbook that's coming along with this, which I really do appreciate and like that. But as far as questions, I think everything was well covered, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dracula, just a quick question. If we want to, I guess, point of a clarification for White Lake Parkway and the sides of the road, maybe Grace wants to just expand on that.
Yes, thank you. Grace Macadin, Senior Management Analyst for the record. I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to clarify it. So the 2050 RTP does identify White Lake Parkway from the Stonegate entrance to Village Boulevard widened in the 2030-2050 timeframe. And so RTC did review this project and they were comfortable with that. And they did kind of offer that that was in the plan to widen White Lake just due to the development we've seen.
Okay. In regards to timing on that, I guess just for clarification, post-building, pre-building?
So for RTC to widen that, it's within the 2030-2050 timeframe. There is a standard in the handbook that once we exceed 100 trips, which is fairly minimal, so we'll see a comprehensive traffic impact analysis fairly early in this project. And any improvements that list, the applicant will be required to make.
Perfect. Thank you. Commissioner Becerra, please.
Great, thank you, Chair. Maybe for Grace, Commissioner Muniz, I'm really impressed by this presentation, by the project, and that you've taken the time with the applicant and the community to really try to put together something that works for everyone. In that vein, we've heard some public sentiment that I think deserves a little bit of questioning, at least for getting some answers. There was concern about the lighting, and I was just wondering if there's night sky friendly lighting that's part of this proposal.
Yes. So just to clarify, anything that's not addressed in this handbook will defer to code for our standard guidelines. And so we do have some things that go above and beyond code in this handbook. One of those is the heights of these lightings. And I think, we're kind of learning with these industrial developments as we go, but I think with the height of these light poles, that can be something where it just increases that flooding and light pollution onto other sites. And so we've restricted the height and then also required them to kind of dim them to safety levels at nighttime. And then also just our standard foot candle measurement at 0.5 foot candles at the property line to have them contain that lighting on site.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I do have a few more questions, but I'll kind of yield for others.
I keep rocking.
All right, let's do it. Thank you, Chair. I'm a little confused, Grace, because I hear that people want this. They need the jobs, want the jobs, and so forth. But then I also heard during the presentation, both from staff, yourself, and the applicant, that we don't know what this might look like, right? So, and then there's a 15-year timeline. So even though folks need/want the jobs, are we talking about 1 year out, 5 years out, 15 years out?
Yeah, it's tough to say. I think a good way to look at this is a zone change with some additional goodies we get on top of that. And so we can't really guarantee with any zone change when the development will happen. But because this is a little bit more targeted, I think it shows that the applicant is more motivated to build something that's more specific. The 15-year timeframe I kind of look at is a little separate. It's helpful for some of these PUDs or SPDs that we see hang out there for 20, 30 years, maybe not that long, but never get built, and they become extremely outdated. And so it allows staff and council to go in and sunset these plans so that we can look at them in a more modern lens.
Great, thank you so much. And I have one more.
Please do.
All right. A lot of the concerns I've heard this evening often already have discussion for a solution or response to them from leadership, whether that's our own city council, staff, or regional planning commission. But sometimes folks just don't know about it, right? So is there an educational campaign in the works or that's going on to inform people about like the 2030 road plan to widen the roads, make sure there's bike paths and so forth up in Cold Springs or these impacted areas?
I think RTC does some significant outreach. I know that we've recently tried to maybe pivot the way that we do outreach. We see that when we do in-person meetings or in-person stakeholder meetings, no one shows up anymore. But I think that's a cue that maybe times have changed. And so we've started to pivot these to maybe more virtual, social media bursts, things of that nature to try to increase this outreach, because it is tough. We do all of this outreach and work to try to educate the public on a project or a process, and we don't get anyone until maybe the city council or planning commission meeting. And so to try to maybe combat or mitigate that, we're trying to change our processes and our outreach techniques so that we can help educate people as to what the actual projects are.
Great. Thanks, Grace.
Appears no more questions from the commissioners. If we want to open discussion or entertain a motion. Commissioner Belto?
I'll make a motion.
All right, go for it.
In the matter of LDC 23-00020, I move to approve the master plan amendment consistent with the, and I can make all the findings. You should be separating into two, is that request? Is that correct?
Principal Planner Nathan Gilbert, that's correct.
Okay. So in matter of LDC 23-00020, based on compliance with the applicable findings, I move to adopt the master plan amendment by resolution and recommend the city council approve the master plan and the zoning map amendment subject to condition 1 and conformance review by the Regional Planning Commission.
We have a motion.
Commissioner Armstrong, I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously.
So I just made them together. Should I make a second one specific to the zoning map amendment?
I thought I heard you leave out zoning map amendment on
Okay.
that motion, so go for it again, brother.
Okay, so the matter of LDC 23-00020, based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I move to adopt the master plan, the zoning map amendment, subject to condition 1 and conformance review by the Regional Planning Commission, and I can make all the findings.
I think that'll fly. Nathan, good?
This is a recommendation to City Council.
Recommendation to City Council. Thank you.
So we have a motion.
Commissioner Becerra, second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Good luck on your project. Thank you all. All right, we're going to close item 5, move on to item 6, zoning code cleanup. Case number TXT 23-00005, Title 18 zoning code cleanup.
And if you wanted to take a 5-minute break, now would be a good time.
What was that? That was foreboding. We will take a 5-minute break. Thank you.
Might be loud. Joe, wake up.
Heather, you ready?
Ready.
All right, we're coming back from break, and I guess I'll just rev it up one more time. We're doing item 6.1, which is case number TXT 23-00005, Title 18 Zoning Code Cleanup. Getting a presentation from Ms. Angela Foos.
Great. Thank you. For the record, Angela Foos, Assistant Director with Development Services. So just kind of a reminder, recap of what we are doing today. It was a couple years ago, back in 2021, we adopted a brand new zoning code. And at that time, we knew that there was going to be changes. Anytime you adopt a big new document, you're always going to find errors. So over the last 3 years, we've been keeping a list of those errors, and we tried to keep it consistent with just this list. There's things in the zoning code that maybe we as staff don't like or the general public doesn't like. But we tried to keep it really limited to what we'd call a code cleanup. If it was a major change, we knew we had to take that separately as a separate text amendment. And as an example, accessory dwelling units or ADUs, we currently don't allow ADUs, so we're doing that as a separate text amendment, so you guys will review that completely separate. Creating a whole new ADU ordinance as part of the code cleanup would really be outside of what we'd call a cleanup item. So just as a reminder of what the things are that we're dealing with as part of this process, anything basic, grammar changes, things that we found confusing as staff. If we can't interpret the code, we have a problem. So we went back and we said, how do we clean some of those things up? Another big thing that we've seen is that we have a lot of challenges with industrial next to residential. And so we also took a look at, well, what can we do to better protect some of these residential neighborhoods? And then, of course, there's always changes with the legislative session, so there's a handful of things that we know we have to do coming out of this last session. In terms of input, we started with a technical advisory committee, and these are people that actually use the zoning code. So these are planners, these are landscape architects, these are engineers. If you use the zoning code, we said, 5 times a week, you actually open it and use it for your job, we would consider you a technical advisory committee member. So we held 7 meetings with that group. We had about, 35 people on that committee, so a pretty robust committee. Again, more of the technical people. We held 7 meetings, got their input, then we took that input, made some changes, and then we went out to stakeholder meetings. We had 9 meetings. Some were in person and some were virtual. I will say, generally speaking, we had very minimal attendance, similar to the staff or the public here tonight, very minimal attendance on this topic. So that was a little disappointed, but at the same time, these are cleanup items. These are not major initiatives. We also went out to all of our social media. So we tried to reach, through the news, we tried to reach people. Through Nextdoor.com, we let people know about these meetings. Through Twitter and Instagram here at the City of Reno, we tried to inform different groups. So in terms of what we're doing now, we have set aside 3 meetings with the Planning Commission. It's a very big document, over 700 pages. So rather than doing it all in one meeting, we're going to break it up. Tonight, I'm going to try and keep it limited to about an hour, just so you guys can stay alert and awake. Next meeting, we have a very limited agenda, so I'll probably keep you guys for a couple hours, and then we'll follow one more meeting after that. And then I'm going to take your feedback. Again, I'm not looking for any recommendations from you at this point. I'm just looking for your feedback. I'm going to take your feedback and go to City Council and let them know your opinion of these code cleanup items. Then the City Council is then going to give us feedback of your feedback. And I'm going to come back to you and I'm going to say, here's what City Council said. And then you will formally make a recommendation. This is a planning commission, and so your recommendation goes to City Council. They can choose to accept your recommendation, or they can choose to modify it. But again, the more information we give them as to why you want these changes made, I think the better off we are. So again, it's a very long process. We will likely get through City Council final adoption next fall. So just know that nothing happens quick, especially when it comes to changes to our zoning code. So let's just dive right in. Like I said, for tonight, we're just going to cover the first about 120 pages, which is about 3 chapters worth. And this is very long and technical, so bear with me and feel free to stop me at any time if you want to go with more specific questions. So first of all, we added some language for a Scrivener's error. These are things like, oh, oops, we spelled something wrong in the zoning code. Should we have to go back and go through a text amendment to clean up spellings? No. So we added language that gives us the ability to make those changes. Our most common example that we see is the word public. A lot of times it comes out as pubic, and so that would be an obvious one. We don't want the word pubic in our zoning code when we're referring to the public. So Scrivener's error, we could clean that up, and we wouldn't have to go back to Planning Commission and City Council to make that type of change. Another area that we're looking at is what we call non-conforming uses. In our code today, we have some language that says if you have a non-conforming use, so let's say 4th Street, years ago, 4th Street was a major corridor, it was a major highway. We had a lot of uses such as auto repair or gas stations. And over the years, we've changed where we allow those uses because the zoning has changed. So if you had a use 40 years ago, maybe it was an auto repair shop on 4th Street, and that use is no longer allowed. Through this non-conforming use section, we allow you to bring that use back because at one time it was allowed. Now, the way the code is written now is that basically you can bring any use in any zoning district anytime you want with a conditional use permit. That wasn't the intent. It was meant to be prove that it was at one time an allowed use that was permitted and it went away for whatever reason and you want to bring it back. So we're changing the language to say you have to prove that your non-conforming use was at one time legally approved. So again, more of a clarity. The way we've interpreted it has been this, but we're putting it in writing to formalize what was intended. Some of the other simple changes, we have whole sections of our code on how we deal with non-conforming structures. That's the building itself. In that section, we kind of accidentally refer to non-conforming uses versus non-conforming structures. That's not right. That whole section should be limited to just things related to the structure. We have another section related to non-conforming uses. So again, more of a cleanup, just oops, we had some wording that was wrong, so we're cleaning that up. No real substance in terms of change. All right, and then related to some of our existing shopping centers, we have some language related to if you're doing routine maintenance. So let's say you have a parking lot and you want to restripe it and repave it. There's some confusion on, well, what triggers it to be considered a substantial change? We find that a lot of these old shopping centers, they don't meet landscape codes that are in place today. A lot of their parking design is old, so they don't meet our parking requirements, meaning maybe the length of the parking stall or the width of the parking stall. But we want to encourage these shopping centers to, make improvements and to just do maintenance. So we added some verbiage just to clarify if you're really just doing routine maintenance of your shopping center, we're not going to penalize you. We want to encourage you. We consider that a non-conforming site because it doesn't meet today's code. But again, we're not going to penalize you for trying to make it better. So we added language that allows you to do that. And then for some of these shopping centers where they want to go really above and beyond, just some minor cleanups, we gave them an out through this minor site plan review. That's a 30-day staff review. If they want to make some bigger changes, and we consider that any big alteration that expand your parking by more than 10%. So the idea is that, we want you to bring you closer into conformance with our zoning code, but not make it so cost prohibitive to do that. So the next chapter is 18.02, and this has to do with our different zoning districts. So number one, we have a table. We call it an annexation table. Basically, it's a table that says, here's what the Washoe County designation is. And if you're annexing that property into Reno, here's what the zoning would be, and here's what the master plan would be. We found some inconsistencies. We found some zoning codes that or some zoning districts that we just left completely off the table. Again, more clarifying it, nothing really of substance, but just cleaning it up to make sure that we have all of our master plan categories and all of our zoning categories accurately reflected in that. And then when it came to the different zoning districts, we made a couple small changes. Number one is we have requirements within each of our zoning districts for the maximum height of a building and the maximum number of stories of a building. So as an example, let's say you're a professional office zoning district, so you have office space. Let's say the maximum height is 35 feet. The maximum number of stories is 2.5. I don't know who builds a 2.5-story building, but we consistently have that. We thought that doesn't even make sense. I don't know how you build 2.5 stories or why we would encourage anyone to build half-story. So we said, let's just remove any reference to maximum number of stories. Our focus is always going to be height. We didn't raise the height. We just said, take out maximum number of stories, however many stories you can build, and the building code really directs how tall each story has to be. So again, it's not something zoning really needs to dictate. It's something that other, regulations kind of take control over. And then we had some, again, cleanup, when we have step backs and setbacks. One thing we found is that we have some language requiring how far you have to be when you have multiple buildings on one lot. And we found that some of our zoning districts have setbacks between buildings, typically 10 feet. And other zonings, it was completely silent. So we said, let's just make all these zoning districts more consistent. And so we added some language that if you have multiple buildings, you have to have at least 10 feet between buildings. Again, more of a consistent just between different zoning districts. Couple super easy ones. We changed some of the nomenclature, just the names in some of our categories. We have entire districts. So we have zoning districts, meaning like mixed use urban, mixed use suburban, mixed use downtown. We call all of that a mixed use district. And it got confusing because we have a mixed use district, which encompasses about, I think, 10 different zoning districts. And then we have that broader category. So we said people are confused between what a mixed-use district is versus mixed-use zoning. So just to make it simpler, we call them urban districts. So that's anything that is zone mixed use. That's our downtown area. That's our general commercial area. We call that an urban district. Similar to what we call non-residential districts. In the code right now, that's anything from industrial to mixed employment, mixed-use airport. We found that confusing because people said, well, what's a non-residential district? Wouldn't that also be general commercial? We said, no, general commercial fits in the one above. So it got confusing. So instead of non-residential districts, we're calling them employment districts. Another just quick change is within our category of mixed-use suburban zoning. This was a new zoning district that we didn't have 3 years ago, and now we have. We needed to beef up our purpose statement so we could better understand where that mixed-use zoning is appropriate. We see it a lot in our major corridors, you know, 4th Street, Virginia Street. That's where mixed-use suburban is more intended. But we're finding is that more people are coming in and requesting a zone change and putting mixed-use suburban zoning pretty much everywhere because it's kind of a catch-all. So we said, let's just clarify where we want to see that mixed-use suburban zoning. Within our professional office zoning district, we have a cap of 35 feet. That's as tall as the building can go. But we had some language that you could go through a site plan review and go up to 55 feet. Now that all seems very simple and easy, but we had a footnote that said that only applies along certain streets. So it became very confusing. We said professional office zoning, there's not a whole lot of it throughout the city. Let's just open it up. You don't have to be on a certain street in order to use that to get the taller 55 feet. So again, we didn't raise the height of what's allowed. We just said, let's open it up to everywhere that's zone professional office. If you want to go taller than 35, you would go through that minor site plan review. Anything over 55 is not allowed. When it comes to more of our industrial zoning districts, we found that we have basically 3 different industrial zoning districts, and they had some conflicts, and it made it difficult to really just administer. From one perspective, it was the height. So we have an I zoning district and an IC zoning district and a mixed employment zoning district. So we looked at the height and what's appropriate and what type of uses we really see. Most of those zoning districts are warehouses, distribution, you know, the typical building that you're seeing there in that picture. And we're starting to see that more and more of them are looking to go taller than 45 feet. So just to be consistent, we said let's cap that at 55 feet. So those 2 zoning districts, again, most of your industrial uses are in those zoning districts. They're now capped at 55 feet instead of 45 feet. We also have some language that talks about within a single building. So you may have like a business center or you have a couple different industrial buildings. We have some limitations that you can't have more than 500,000 square feet per building. Otherwise, it triggers a couple other things. And so we just cleaned that up because it got very confusing as well. Just trying to administer, you know, do we care if you have multiple tenants in a building versus one tenant? Probably not. It's the same, you know, the building's a building. So we cleaned up some of those requirements that really just didn't make sense. And we found that it was just causing more administrative questions than not. And then when it came to things that trigger a conditional use permit versus a site plan review or a minor site plan review, we kind of reduced some of these things. So instead of having to go through a conditional use permit for some of these types of things, we lessened it to a minor site plan review. Again, conditional use permit, Planning Commission review, minor site plan review, 30-day staff review. We still do full public notice, so you still get a postcard if you're within a certain distance. You still have the opportunity to comment. You still have the opportunity to appeal any of these decisions to City Council. We have what we call a gaming overlay district. You guys don't see a whole lot of these because you don't get a whole lot of new casinos coming your way. We have some sign regulations specific to gaming overlays. So as an example, the area near Keystone, 5th Street, 4th Street, that general area, that's all considered a gaming overlay. So we have sign allowances. If you're a casino, you can go much bigger. But what we found is it was written to say that as long as you're in the gaming overlay, you can use those sign allowances. So somebody like In-N-Out Burger, obviously not a gaming establishment, was able to put in a much bigger sign because they were in a gaming overlay. The intent was just for the casinos, the licensed casinos, to be able to have the bigger sign. So we added clarification. Again, we knew what the intent was. We just missed it in specifying within this specific section of code. So again, just to clean up, to make it make more sense and frankly match what was already in our sign ordinance. This is a separate section related to gaming overlay. So quick cleanup. Within the Wells Avenue neighborhood plan, we had one small change. We are, I would say, intending to do a more robust neighborhood outreach process to look at the Wells Avenue neighborhood plan. We will start that probably after we finish the zoning code update. But one quick cleanup just for clarification. Within Wells Avenue, there's some very specific parking requirements, and we added some clarity to help understand how to administer those parking requirements. All right, within our section called Table of Uses, we basically have probably 20 pages. It's a nice little spreadsheet that shows every type of use that we allow or prohibit, and which zoning districts that use is allowed in. So we took a look at all of the different uses, and we have a list of ones that maybe we needed to expand where they're allowed. So major government facility, it's a great example. That would be things like a jail. I'm trying to think of a couple other ones. Things like, gosh, give me an example of another one. We did just talk about big government facilities, things that, not your DMV or your police station, those are minor, but a major government facility, maybe where you have a big waste station. So things that, the government owns, but really have a big impact. So like the best one would be the Washoe County Jail, right? You have a big impact on the community. We looked at where it's allowed now, and we found that it really didn't have a lot of zoning districts where it was allowed, so we added it to some new zoning districts, but we also required a conditional use permit. Those types of major facilities really involve, or should involve, a public process to make sure we're addressing all the concerns. So again, we expanded where it's allowed, but triggered more conditional use permits. Churches, religious assemblies, again, we looked at them and just expanded some of the zoning districts to where they're allowed. Child care centers, that has actually been a very hot topic. The need for more child care centers is really growing, and we're finding that our zoning code was restrictive on where we allow them. So we opened it up to allow them in more districts, and in some cases required more of a public review process. Schools, bars, hotels, motels, again, all of these are some pretty basic things that you can see why we just took a look and said, where does it make sense? Where will we see those types of uses? Let's be a little bit more flexible. Separate from that, we also said, where should we be more restrictive? The 2 or 3 that jumped out the most was your hazardous waste facility. We don't get those very often, if ever. But we took a look and said, let's require a conditional use permit anywhere they're allowed. So they're pretty much only allowed in your industrial areas, but now we require a conditional use permit. They're not allowed just by right in any zoning district. Some of these other ones that we'd mentioned before with warehousing and distribution centers, we took another look at those. In a lot of those areas, they are allowed by right, and we took another look at them and said, maybe we want to require a conditional use permit, because again, they tend to have a bigger impact. We're seeing a lot of them in North Valleys, and so the ones that are near residential, how do we better protect, the residents and provide a buffer between? So we took a harder look at those. And then we added a whole new category for data centers. And I don't know if you have been watching the news or seeing what the kind of the interest is, but we have had a ton of interest in data centers. They're different from manufacturing or warehousing because they really don't have many employees. So there's not a lot of traffic. They don't have big semi trucks coming. They're generally, very low noise, very low smell. So they really don't fit the typical category of manufacturing or warehouse. So we added a whole new category with use standards specific to data centers. Okay, and then separate from that, list of that, here's where the uses are allowed and not allowed, we also have what we call use standards. So within each of these different categories, we have additional standards. So a lot of these, for instance, childcare, we have limitations on where they can be located. If you're in a residential area, for instance, you have to have a play area. We want to make sure that you have a wall buffering your play area if there's any houses next to you. So we just took a look at all those things and really kind of beefed it up. We also found that our standards were not in alignment with Washoe County Social Services. That is actually the licensing agency, so we wanted to make sure that we were consistent with social services so that we didn't have two conflicting sets of rules. Minor government facility, those are things like your police station and your fire station, libraries. We added more administrative flexibility, and we've had a couple come before this commission in the last couple years. Our new public safety center, which is our police station, the city came before you with a request for a variance for landscaping and fencing as well. So each of these is really unique and different. As a police station, you're concerned about safety. So fencing was a big deal. We couldn't meet the code because we wanted additional fencing on the property line and the code wouldn't allow it. So we said, for these types of facilities, let's allow more administrative flexibility to work with the user. Again, the idea is that you're a government agency, you're providing some kind of protection for the public. So rather than having to go through a public hearing for all of these things, let the administrator have more say in how those buildings are designed. Again, looking at the need of what the use is. Fire stations are another one. We want to do what's best for the fire department, and so providing flexibility for them to design their site is really key in not adding extra hurdles.
Would you entertain a question on this topic,
Sure.
or would you prefer to
No,
wait?
absolutely.
Hey, let's give Angela a break. You were just going. You need some water? Okay.
I could use a Red Bull right now.
Commissioner Belto, please.
Let me find, sorry, I had my notes. So in the, I got some concerns from people that are involved with the school district. So I wanted to hear your response to some of those concerns. So one of the concerns had to do with the zoning for schools and the distinction between elementary and post-secondary schools. And their concern was that as the language is written, it would preclude the building of schools that maybe were either three-tiered, so elementary, junior high school, versus elementary and 7th and 8th grade versus high school. So how would the zoning changes as proposed allow for flexibility for the district to build that different types of schools?
Yeah, just maybe let me back up. Back in, I think it was the 2013 legislative session, the legislature told Reno Sparks and Washoe County that we needed to play better in the sandbox, and we need to have the same set of rules when it comes to schools. And specifically, schools were being built, and in Reno, they required X number of parking spaces. In Washoe County, they required a different number of parking spaces. Or maybe they had a different requirement for landscaping and for setbacks. So per the legislature, all three jurisdictions got together and came up with the same set of rules related to schools. So step number one is we went back and we looked at our regulations and what are Sparks and the county doing, and are we consistent with them? So we cleaned that up. We found that over the years, our zoning code had been modified. New things had been added. Frankly, a lot of them just didn't make sense to us. So we took things out, which the school district, I think, is happy about. We took out some regulations. And then we, again, made sure that we were aligned with what the other two jurisdictions require when it comes to schools. We did add some language requiring that new schools have to come in with some kind of study that shows how they're doing kid drop-off and pickup. This is consistent for whether it's a school district school or a charter school. What we have found, really coming out of COVID, we have a lot of new charter schools, and many of them just go straight to a building permit. And so we really don't have the ability to ask for some of these things unless we put it in the code. So we're asking for things like, how are you going to, handle queuing of kids, and how are you going to handle where the crosswalks are? The school district also commented on that and said they disagreed that we shouldn't have that regulation. And again, they do that anyway. Washoe County School District does those things anyway. But we have to be fair and treat all schools the same. So we put specific language that says, before we issue a building permit, show us how you're going to do all these things. How are you going to address safety of, kids walking and buses? So I think, number one, I'm hoping the school district understands why we're doing that. It's the things that they provide to us anyway. They allow us to comment, we make changes, we work with them. For the charter schools now, we've given us the ability, even if they don't trigger an entitlement and they go straight to a building permit, gives us the ability to ask for more information if they're not providing that. So I think that was one of the concerns from the school district. Secondly, there's kind of two tiers of where schools are allowed, and this is from the regional plan. High schools are allowed in certain areas. I believe they are required to be on an arterial versus K through 8, not on an arterial. So we separate the two. Again, K through 8 is kind of one tier of school, and then high school is your 9 through 12. And so that is better aligned with what the regional plan dictates. I think if we're starting to see more interest in having a K through 12, and we see some of these for some of the charter schools, we are starting to see some of that design. We would work with the school district or that charter school to figure out, again, how are we addressing the regional plan rules, as well as from our own zoning code perspective. So I am not seeing a major issue because, again, we continue to always work with the schools. We wouldn't prohibit them, but it's something that has recently come up, at least on one charter school that's providing K through 12. So my suggestion is we should work with Sparks and Washoe County, and the 3 jurisdictions should come up with a unified answer. I don't want Reno to go out on its own and go rogue and do something that is different than the other 2 jurisdictions when we all agreed to do the same thing.
And if I may too, oh, sorry guys, Commissioner Draculich, I am similar to Commissioner Velto. I had a stakeholder reach out to me, and kind of on your topic with the on-site drop-off and kind of the queuing. They were under the impression that, and what I'm being told, administrators have control over the site design, which may lead to this maybe miscommunication on the best practice for drop-off pickup. So I don't know if you kind of covered that in that. I wasn't sure if the administrator, the issue with the administrator having control over that is something you're going to cover or can right now.
Yeah, and so the administrator in this case would be a collection of, our traffic engineers, our civil engineers, our planners. We all get together and we look at a site. And we also, reference best practices. There's Public Works Design Manual standards. There's, traffic manuals that also dictate school. So unfortunately, there's no one set of rules for how to do school drop-off and pickup. And we can definitely see it in some of our older design schools. They have very poorly designed drop-off and pickup, and you've got, cars queued up for blocks because there's no place for, kids to safely get in and out. With the newer schools that have been designed, I will say that's pretty much one of the key things that everyone's looking at. So they are designed much better. But again, the school district themselves have not been a problem. They have been great partners at working with us, helping us to work with them. It's some of these charter schools that come into existing shopping centers, for instance, right? If you have a shopping center and a new school coming in, how are you handling safely kid drop off and pick up? So by putting in a requirement that says, we as staff need to look at that, you need to show us what you're doing, you need to come up with a plan, and we need to approve it. From a code enforcement perspective, it also gives us some teeth to say, if once your school's built, and if you have conflicts with drop-off and pickup, and we will know right away because we get a ton of complaints from the neighbors when there's a conflict, or even the parents, we can go back to the school and say, hey, let's reconfigure this, show us how you can get out there and help direct traffic. So just, again, from trial and error and the ones that have been problematic because it wasn't designed correctly or in a way that's been really safe for the kids or the parents, we added this language to say, let us work with you to make sure that we create a safe environment.
Okay. Commissioner Velto?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up on that. So I guess I'm looking at the code here on 1803-303, and when it's defining educational facilities, it identifies schools, primary, schools, secondary. So if you had a school come in that was all of the above, how would you, it seems like it wouldn't fit. There'd
And
be
we've had a couple.
conflict.
Yeah, I mean, it's come up as an issue already, so we have to be flexible and administratively work with them to try and figure out how to best address it. My suggestion too is, with your feedback, we would like to go back and work with Sparks and Washoe County and ask them, how are you guys addressing this? Let's all come up with the same answer.
Thank you.
Great, thank
Commissioner
you.
Romeyer,
I had a question about the uses 2 slides ago. Would you prefer if I ask at the end? I'm not, yeah, the one with the data center and whatnot. And the religious assembly. I guess I appreciate the code cleanup is starting to look at uses more inclusive or exclusive. With these new uses, I would say some feedback would be that maybe a data center, because it comes with so much energy infrastructure, that really changes the site design, what happens outside the data center, where it says they're now allowed. Is that the kind of thing like feedback would be to with a conditional use permit, or they're just going to be allowed?
So we currently did not have a use for data center at all.
Okay.
And the interest we've gotten, they've come to us, the developers have said, well, what use do I qualify as, right? Am I a warehouse? Am I indoor manufacturing? And so we said, let's create your own category and your own set of standards. So for instance, all data centers, we have different zoning districts where you can apply. They all trigger a conditional use permit for that reason. I mean, again, the fencing, the noise, the location, is it appropriate? So all data centers trigger a conditional use permit the way we've proposed it.
Okay, great. Just thank you for that clarification. What I just said, uses allowed, I was jumping to conclusions. And then similarly with the religious assembly, does Reno Code have a size or like a number of seats or a trip gen where then it would also require some sort of entitlement or review process?
Not related to traffic. We do have things that trigger based on number of traffic trips would trigger a traffic study. But again, those can go straight to building permit, not necessarily a public review. Within the religious assembly, we have certain zoning districts they're allowed by right, and certain zoning districts they require a conditional use permit. We do also have some use standards basically that says if you're a church that's on, I believe, a collector or an arterial roadway, pretty busy roadway, you need to use the collector or arterial as your main point of access and not access through the residential streets. Again, just trying to create, most of our churches we see in kind of residential neighborhoods, and how do we better protect those neighborhoods from an overflow of traffic and those kinds of things. So we have some use standards that they have to follow no matter where they're at. But we do have certain zoning districts where they also trigger a conditional use permit.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Commissioner Armstrong, please.
This is also, I think, related to sort of the expansion of the zoning district. So I had a stakeholder reach out, and their question was related to tattoo parlors and similar, I think, body painting entities is how it's defined. But effectively, they saw that this was going on, and they wanted to know if it had been considered bringing it back into downtown, or I guess it would roughly be considered an urban district. I believe it used to be allowed in downtown, and then there was a rationale for why it wasn't allowed in downtown. But I just wanted to get a better understanding of, is that being considered as maybe an allowable use in the future? And if not, maybe just some context on why we don't have it downtown anymore.
Yeah, and that's a great question. There was some history on that, and it was before my time, and Nate, probably before, or maybe you do remember, there was interest, I believe, from city council to remove it from certain parts of the city, including the downtown. A tattoo as a use, tattoo parlor as a use, isn't a separate use. It's lumped into like a professional service. I think if Planning Commission has interest in bringing it back as its own specific use and also looking at where it's appropriate, I think that would be good feedback that we could share with the council.
Excuse me, just as a point of clarification, it is its own land use,
Oh, it
the
is.
tattoo, yeah. Previous council direction was to remove that as an allowed use specifically to the downtown core. So that was a previous council direction. They're not currently allowed in that location, but we have received, we get constant inquiries about where can I do tattoos, and, if the planning commission wants to evaluate the appropriateness of lumping it into like a general personal service or something to that effect. But the preclusion from tattoo parlors downtown was a previous council direction.
Do you remember what year that was? I mean, how long ago was that?
I don't recall offhand.
Thousands? Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I would just like to say on record, I do think that is a path, at least I would be willing to go down. I think it would be worth exploring, and just have my feedback on the record that I think it would be good to revisit that and maybe bring it back in some form as an allowable use downtown, because it seems like there is a lot of demand. And I think things are maybe a little different now in terms of that business or industry, and I can understand maybe why at the time they didn't want it downtown, but I do think in some instances it could fit and be, it could enhance or add value to some of the developments that we're seeing in the downtown core. Thank you.
Okay. All right, any other feedback on these slides? Okay.
Commissioner Munoz, did you want to jump in at all, buddy? Don't want to forget about you.
No, I'm good. Just listening along. Thank you.
Okay. Angela, keep going, please.
Okay, so related to animal facilities, and we kind of lump animal facilities into one general category. It's everything from dog boarding, dog grooming, veterinarian hospital. We currently have some restrictions on outdoor components. A lot of these, doggy daycares, they have an outdoor space. And our current zoning district kind of limits, if you're within 150 feet of residential zoning, you can't have that outdoor component. So we expanded that to say you can have an outdoor activity through the approval of a conditional use permit. So we can look at them on a case-by-case basis. And then related to auto service and repair, we have a lot of these types of businesses, and we currently try and limit the service bays from facing the street or the right-of-way. And we kind of went back and said, well, why isn't that where we want them to face as opposed to residential? So we just provided some clarification. If you have one of these types of uses, we prefer that you don't face the residential. We're trying to protect the residents from the noise. And then we added some use standards to better address some of the other negative concerns with just the noise that comes out of those to help with screening and that kind of thing. All right, some of these other similar use standards that we looked at, car washes, very similar. A lot of these car washes have the loud vacuums outside. Same with the bays of when you go in. So we added some use standards to kind of mitigate some of those impacts when you are next door to residential. Electric substations, so those are the big NV Energy substations. We have a whole section in our zoning code with all these regulations, but they're kind of conflicting. It says like you shall do all these things, but maybe these things, and then only sometimes these things. We said, I don't even know how to interpret that. So we deleted all of those things that didn't make sense. And we just said, staff will work with you on a case-by-case basis, depending on where you're at. If you're in a substation that's out in the middle of nowhere, we probably don't need to be concerned with, landscaping and screening of landscaping, versus if you're in more of the city urban area, those are things we're concerned with. So again, more flexibility, but enough that staff can still weigh in and look at them individually. Crematorium, there was some language that was updated per state law, so we just updated our use regulations to reflect that. Outdoor storage, this is definitely a hot topic. We have a lot of businesses that want to do outdoor storage, and our standards were a little confusing. So we cleaned them up and we added some additional screening. Typically when you have outdoor storage, you're piling things up. And so you need fencing, you need landscaping to help screen it from parks or from residents. And so we beefed up some of those screening requirements. From a warehouse and distribution point or perspective, that picture on the top is really a good example of especially in the North Valleys area where you see a lot of these big industrial buildings with a bunch of dock doors, what are we doing to mitigate those impacts? It's everything from the noise from the trucks, the lights at night when it's super bright out, the amount of truck activity. So we added some standards and really tried to keep the residential mitigation at the top of our concern here. So if you have a new warehouse or distribution, we now require that you look at the site and try and avoid any of these dock doors facing residential zoning. If you can design your site to have the dock doors face inward or face the right-of-way or anything that's not residential, that would be preferred. We also added some additional screening standards, whether it's fencing or additional landscaping with berms and then trees on top. And if you still can't meet any of those, we did provide a minor site plan review process. So you would still go through some kind of review process to tell us how you're going to address it. Maybe not meet our code requirements, but again, give us flexibility to work with you on a case-by-case basis. A good example is the Chewies out in North Valley. They have a huge distance. I think it's over 300 feet from the back of their dock doors to where the houses are. Plus, there's a big change in elevation. There's a railroad track, but it's very impactful because even something with such great distance, there really wasn't a way to screen because of the grade change. Even if you put in a 10-foot wall, those houses are up here. So a 10-foot wall does nothing to mitigate that. So in those kinds of situations, we really need to look at it on a case-by-case and figure out a way to mitigate those impacts from those neighbors. All right, drive-throughs. This is a big one. It was funny, pre-COVID, drive-throughs were very negative. Everybody hated drive-throughs because we were very encouraging people to take the bus and to walk. So drive-throughs were like, what we shouldn't be doing. And then COVID hit and drive-throughs became the best thing ever. And frankly, saved a lot of businesses, right? So many businesses shut doors completely, but if they had drive-throughs, they could keep their business open. So we're seeing a lot more drive-throughs, and frankly, we're just a lot more friendly towards drive-throughs, I think, as a result of COVID. But we have found that some of these big users, like the In-N-Out Burger or the Dutch Brothers, they have huge queuing lines, and our zoning code doesn't have rules special for them. Our rules are basically geared for your Starbucks and your, Bank of America drive-through. So we added some language that basically says we have a staff the ability to ask for a separate queuing study. Basically, you have a traffic engineer provide a study to prove that based on what your use is and how many cars you're going to generate, you've designed the site correctly. I think that's a great one. Again, our goal is to not over-regulate drive-throughs, but you know which ones I'm talking about that are problematic. All right, live entertainment. This is something we've had in code for a while. We have some regulations. If you are within a certain distance of sensitive uses like parks or residential, we just added some language of how we measure the distance between your live entertainment and some of those uses. Open lot parking, that's basically if you have a site and all it has on it is a parking lot, there's no building, just a parking lot, we call that open lot parking. Our code right now had some conflicting rules on if you're a temporary parking lot versus a full-time forever parking lot. We have a lot of temporary parking lots if somebody says, hey, I just want to put in a temporary parking lot for a couple years, and I plan to eventually build on that site. So we clarified some of the rules for if you do a temporary parking lot. Things that we still want to see are landscaping and lighting and sidewalks and fencing where appropriate. So we just better clarified what's considered temporary and what's considered permanent, and then the rules for both. Stockpiling. This is a big one where we've gotten a lot of complaints from the development community. Stockpiling is just a temporary thing. It's something that developers do when they need to move dirt on a temporary basis. We see this a lot on our public works road projects. So anytime you have a road project, you have to have a place where you can pile material. Again, typically it's 6 months or 12 months or 1 year. Our rules were very restrictive and were conflicting with what everyone else in the community does. So Sparks has rules for stockpiling, Washoe County, Carson City. Ours were by far the most strict, and we had the most complaints. So we went back and we just cleaned that up and tried to better align with just best practices. Again, you have a permitting process. You're allowed to do it for 12 months. Staff can allow for another 12-month extension past that. Beyond that, you have to clean up your site, re-veg it, and return it to what it was before.
Yeah, Angela?
Yeah.
Quick question on the open lot parking.
Yes.
Is there an encouragement for shade structures or some form of sustainability? Like you see a lot of open lot parking in downtown, for instance, right, going on, and perhaps elsewhere. But it almost seems like prime for solar structures or charging stations or additional things that would complement a parking lot. Does the city encourage those type of things, or is it just?
Yeah, I mean, anytime somebody wants to request it, we don't have any issues with it. The things that we look at is, have you designed it correctly? And a lot of times it's expensive to put in solar structures, so we don't have a lot of developers that are just doing it because they want to do it. But we definitely don't discourage it.
Okay, great, thank you.
Great. All right, so this is where we're going to stop for the night. Again, this covers the first 3 chapters of the zoning code. For our next meeting, we're going to go over all of the development standards. So that's parking and lighting and grading and hillsides. It's going to be riveting. Bring your Red Bull. And like I said, what I'm looking for tonight is just general feedback. If there's things that you like or don't like, let me know. We heard you talk about a couple of things tonight, but if there's other things that you want, again, we'll take that to council and let them know your input. But generally, this is just really an open dialogue with you for these first 3 chapters.
Thank you, Angela. We are going to treat this normally, so we got our presentation from staff. Looks like we're not going to hear anything else, so we will kick it to the commissioners for disclosures. Commissioner Velto.
Commissioner Velto spoke with the community leader about schools and how zoning code may affect schools.
Commissioner Rohrmeyer, no disclosures.
Commissioner Becerra, no disclosures.
Commissioner Armstrong, I spoke with a community stakeholder on the tattoo item that I had brought up.
Commissioner
Munoz, no disclosures.
All right. Commissioner Draculich, I spoke with a stakeholder addressing the schools. All right, we'll also open this up to public comment. Heather, any Zoom or, I don't see any requests to speak forms.
We don't have any public comment for this item right now,
I can't believe it.
and no hands are up.
Okay. Anybody in the chambers wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. And with that said, I guess we can kick it. If we have more questions, which look like we kind of did, we can kick to discussion. And before we get into discussion, I guess just for clarification, Mr. Gilbert, on the motion.
No motion tonight, I will add.
Okay.
I was told you're not allowed to make a motion.
Okay, so no motion tonight. So I guess we can continue with discussion or questions. If not, will we just, anybody have any questions, concerns? Look like we'll be picking up where we left off with her. Thank you, Angela. Commissioner Munoz, anything on your end, buddy?
No, nothing in mind. Thank you.
Okay. Then we will close item 6 and move to item 7, Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Liaison Report. Commissioner Rohrmeyer.
Commissioner Rohrmeyer. February meeting, we had the Heiser project come through at Truckee Meadows Regional Planning, and it was approved.
All right, excellent. We'll close item 7, move to item 8, staff announcements.
Yeah, all right, just to give a quick update, the Reno Axe conditional use permit was appealed and will be heard by City Council on appeal on March 27th. Also, at your next Planning Commission, there will be a brief legal training for the Planning Commission. And let's see, actions taken by City Council and Planning Commission actions, Bella Vista, the Bella Vista Phase 2 PUD will be heard by council April 10th, and council received a request for continuance for the Mill and Gregg Street item. The Planning Commission made a recommendation on, so they won't be hearing that soon. They will be renoticing when council would be entertaining that item.
Thank you. And when's our next meeting? I can remember.
April 3rd.
April 3rd. Great, thanks. All right, closing item 8, moving to item 9, Commissioner suggestion for future agenda items. Commissioner Becerra, please.
Sure, I have one. I did speak with a native tribe leader Brian Melendez, who's president and CEO of Tribal Minds, and in the spirit of our City of Reno 2023 annual report, Section F, where we're trying to work with more folks, I'd like to invite him to come speak with the Planning Commission and just share some insights on how we can work closer together, if that sounds good to everyone.
Sounds good to me.
All right. How would I go about that to have it on the agenda as opposed to just public comment?
Follow up with that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Great. Close item 9, move to item 10, public comment. This item is for either public comment on any action item or for any general public comment. Heather?
We did not receive any correspondence, voicemails, or request to speak forms for this item.
All right, anybody in the chambers?
I'm so sorry. We do have one hand up in the Zoom.
Okay, fire away.
Okay, Luis, you can go ahead and unmute and make your comment.
My name is Louise Souffrant. Listening to this Planning Commission, I noticed that the discussion of traffic and other input on the community is mentioned, but I never hear any comment about the impact on health of the communities. Is there any process and is there any effort by the commission to evaluate the impact of what is being planned on the health of the community members? And if not, I believe it should be part of any commission's responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Anybody else on Zoom?
Nobody else has their hand raised, no.
Okay. Anybody in the chambers wish to speak on public comment? Seeing none, we will close public comment. Move on to item 11, adjournment.
Mr. Chair,
Oh.
I'm so sorry.
We got another?
No, we don't. No.
So never mind?
Yes, never mind.
Item 11, adjournment.
Okay.
You just moved it? Okay. All in favor for adjournment?
Aye.
Have a good night, y'all.
Thank you.
I'll just check in with you, Nate.
Comments.
See ya.